It started as a distant rumble, a war that seemed far from America's shores, a conflict that seemed irrelevant. But as the world burned in the flames of World War I, one question echoed across the ocean. Could the United States stay out of it? The answer would change the course of history. As America slowly stepped into the fight, it wasn't just a military power that was born, it was a global superpower, with a moral mission that would define the 20th century. In the summer of 1914, Europe found itself spiraling into war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary triggered a chain reaction, drawing nations into a conflict that would leave scars on the world for generations. The world watched in horror as alliances once forged in peace were now being tested by bloodshed. But for the United States far across the Atlantic, the war seemed like someone else's problem. President Woodrow Wilson vowed to keep America out, adhering to a policy of neutrality that most Americans supported. After all, the country had long avoided European entanglements, and it seemed sensible to stay clear of a war that had no clear benefit to the American people. Intense. The war that had been brewing for years soon became impossible to ignore. By 1915, the tide had turned in favor of the Central Powers, led by Germany, and the war was no longer confined to Europe. As the German military began to use unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting not just enemy ships, but civilian ones, the stakes changed dramatically. Then came the unthinkable, the sinking of the Lusitania. This British ocean liner traveling from New York to Liverpool was torpedoed by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland. Among the 1,198 people who died, 128 were Americans. The tragedy sparked fury across the United States. The war that had seemed so far away now felt personal. It was no longer about foreign powers clashing on foreign soil. It was about innocent lives lost in a senseless act of aggression. How could America stay out of a war when its own citizens were being killed? But President Wilson, still deeply committed to neutrality, held back. The United States, he argued, was a nation of peace, and entering the war would only escalate the bloodshed. Diplomacy remained his first choice. Yet as more and more Americans demanded justice for the lives lost, Wilson knew that the nation's patience was thinning. The growing wave of support for war could no longer be ignored. And then, in early 1917, a telegram from Germany reached Mexico, promising to support Mexican claims to U.S. territory in exchange for an alliance against America. The Zimmerman telegram was intercepted by British intelligence, and its revelation to the U.S. government sent shockwaves across the nation. The idea that Germany was plotting against American sovereignty was the final straw. On April 2, 1917, President Wilson stood before Congress and made a declaration that would mark a pivotal turning point in history. The world must be made safe for democracy. In that moment, the United States was no longer a passive observer. It was an active participant in a war that would reshape the world. The war that had seemed distant now seemed inevitable, and America was prepared to do its part. The declaration of war was met with mixed emotions. While some Americans rallied behind the president's call, eager to protect their interests and ideals, others questioned whether this war, so far removed from their own lives, was truly America's fight. Yet, despite the opposition, the nation was galvanized. Soldiers enlisted, industries shifted gears to produce war materials, and the country's economy was restructured to support the war effort. The United States was no longer just a potential force. It was a necessary one. But with war came immense challenges. The U.S. military, although large in size, was woefully unprepared for modern warfare. The trench warfare and industrialized killing machines of World War I were unlike anything the American military had ever faced. The question on everyone's mind was, could a nation so unfamiliar with such brutal tactics make a real difference on the front lines? The answer came quickly. As American forces began landing in France in 1917, The shock of the war's reality was evident. General John J. Pershing, tasked with leading the American Expeditionary Force, AEF, faced an immediate challenge: to integrate thousands of raw, inexperienced soldiers into the already exhausted ranks of the British and French forces. The trenches were unlike anything the soldiers had imagined. Mud, rats, lice, and the constant sound of gunfire became their new reality. The notion of heroism was replaced by a fight for survival. The battlefield was a harrowing and unforgiving place, and the brutal conditions left no room for weakness. But even in the face of overwhelming adversity, American soldiers proved their worth. The Allies, who had been fighting for years, welcomed the fresh influx of troops, and morale was boosted. The United States was no longer just a supplier of weapons and resources. It was now a critical player in the battle against the Central Powers. The energy and determination of the American forces brought a new vitality to the Allied campaign. And soon, the question shifted from whether the U.S. could make a difference to how much of a difference they could make. The defining moment came with the Meuse-Argonne offensive, a pivotal battle in the fall of 1918. Over 1 million American soldiers participated in this decisive push against the Germans. For weeks, they fought through the rugged terrain of northeastern France, facing enemy soldiers entrenched in fortified positions. The fighting was fierce, and the casualties were staggering. But the Americans, bolstered by their training and resolve, pushed forward. They broke through enemy lines, marking a turning point in the war. Germany, already on the brink of collapse, could not withstand the onslaught. On November 11, 1918, the war came to an end. The armistice was signed, and the world exhaled. The United States had played a decisive role in securing victory for the Allies, but the cost had been high. Over 100,000 American lives had been lost, and countless others had been wounded or forever changed by the war's horrors. But the war had also transformed the United States in ways no one could have predicted. The aftermath of the war brought both triumph and uncertainty. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, reshaped the world's political landscape, but it also sowed the seeds of future conflict. The Allies imposed harsh reparations on Germany, setting the stage for economic instability that would fuel the rise of extremism in the years to come. Meanwhile, President Wilson's vision for a League of Nations, an international organization designed to prevent future wars, was rejected by the American Senate. Despite America's central role in shaping the outcome of the war, the nation chose to turn inward, retreating into isolationism. It was a decision that would haunt the world in the years to come. But America's involvement in World War I had irrevocably altered the global order. The United States had emerged not just as a military power, but as a moral force on the world stage. The nation had shown the world that it was willing to fight for its values: democracy, freedom, and justice. But the true legacy of America's involvement in the war would unfold in the decades ahead, as the country would be called upon once again to face the challenges of a rapidly changing world. If this story left you questioning how one decision can change the world, imagine the impact of a nation's role in shaping history. Hit the like button if you found this as eye-opening as we did, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal the untold truths of the past. Your support helps us bring more content like this, content that challenges, inspires, and changes the way we view the world. Let's dive deeper together. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.